My question's not political, it's scientific. We understand that clouds are very important in dictating whether the Earth warms or cools.
Yes.
We are on the skeptic side of the argument, we say lack of clouds means more warming of the Earth.
Yes.
Why in all the IPCC models do they say clouds have positive feedback, i.e. more clouds increase the temperature of the Earth? I don't understand the argument. Why have they not changed that?
Well, that's an extremely good question. If you're asking me to explain why the IPCC gets that or anything else wrong, I can't. I mean, you raise a very fair point. They do admit, and we must be this fair to them, they do admit that they don't really understand clouds, but part of the reasons why they're willing to make that extremely rare admission that they don't understand something is that they want to conceal that they do understand perfectly well the implications of Dr. Pinker's paper and of a number of other papers like it. Wild et al. Is another one. There's the Urbid satellite data results, that's another. There are several of these papers out there now, all of which show for that period exactly what caused the warming, which was the reduction in cloud cover. And when you see the conclusions of the chapter on observations and the subchapter on clouds in chapter 3 of the IPCC's report, the only conclusion you can come to is that they were deliberately avoiding the very clear implications of Dr. Pinker's paper. They knew perfectly well that if they took proper account of that paper, they would have to evaluate climate sensitivity as low by the remarkably simple calculation that I showed you on the screen, or something very, very close to it, and they simply funked it because they knew that if they did that and admitted that all their previous reports were wrong, they'd be out of business before you could say Jack Robinson.
Thank you. The gentleman at the microphone over there.
Thank you very much. Lord Monckton, Len Williams is my name, and I've been reading everything that you presented here prior to this. One of the practical issues in the real world that relate to the applicability of an emissions trading scheme is the cost of carbon credits.
Yes.
Could you outline to us what is happening to the cost of carbon credits in Europe? Because here in Australia, approximately on the second week of December, the North Queensland Sugarcane Farmers Cooperative closed down a scheme where they were burning the waste rubble from the sugarcane
Yes.
to create power, to stop them from burning the rubble when they were harvesting cane in the normal manner. The scheme closed because they were going to lose $10 million because the price of carbon had collapsed. In southwestern Victoria...
Sorry, your question is?
I think we've got the question. Yep. I'll take it from there if I may. We'll get all the further details later. The point is this, that in Europe, the emissions trading scheme has collapsed twice. What happened was at first, the commissars decided that they would allow each country to decide how much carbon emissions it would allow itself. And every country allowed itself more carbon emissions than it was actually emitting. Except Britain, of course, which, goody two-shoes Britain, we were going to show leadership by destroying more of our economy than anybody else. So what happened was that within months, the entire damn thing collapsed. So they did it again. And this time they didn't allow quite so much emissions to each country. And then the financial recession hit, and it collapsed again. So now they're trying it for a third time with a totally artificial, rigged market, and all it's doing is closing down the steelworks in Redcar and sending the jobs to India. So that's what's happened in the ETS here. Similar things with the ETS when they first tried it in New Zealand. It completely fell apart. And indeed, already in the United States, we're seeing the effects of it before they've even introduced it, in the fact that one of the largest aluminium smelters in America has had to close because it now can't find anyone that will sell it enough electricity to keep the thing open. So many coal-fired power stations have been stopped by the greenies that already America's economy, piece by piece, at the edges at the moment, but gradually working inwards, is beginning to shut down. If that's what you want here, you must be bonkers.
I do have one question that's been submitted in writing, and I'll try to paraphrase it to speed up the process. This gentleman points out that there are other pollutants that cause concern to the health of people, and climate change may or may not be affected by atmospheric pollution, but it's only an effect of a very obvious cause. And the question is, do you agree that the focus should be on atmospheric pollution, and by cleaning up the atmosphere, business will achieve the certainty that it seems to be seeking in the whole matter?
That's an extremely good question, and I'm happy to answer it in the affirmative. Yes, of course, the problem is not CO2, because CO2 is plant food. It's essential to all plant and therefore animal life on Earth. There has been a terrible shortage of it in the atmosphere for the last 15 million years, but for most of the last 600 million years, if I can stray a little bit into Ian's territory here, CO2 concentration has been at well above 1,000 parts per million, compared with less than 400 parts per million today. So we could do with more CO2. Let's hear you. More CO2. Again, more CO2. But you're quite right. There are many real environmental problems. Global warming is not one of them. Warming is generally better than cooling anyway. We're not going to get very much warming, but we could certainly, in Scotland, do with a heck of a lot more global warming. I've had to cancel my order from Haggart's of Aberfeldy for my grass kilt for the third time running. But there certainly are many real environmental problems. You mentioned, for instance, atmospheric pollution. That's a problem not so much in our own countries now in the West, because we've largely cleaned it up. There's more we can no doubt do, but most of what can be done has already been achieved. But in China, the only artifact you can see from space during the day is the Asian brown haze, a filthy pollutant cloud, which definitely needs to be cleaned up. And that's not the only problem. There's also overfishing. The gallant BBC man here, Rupert Murray, who is filming this whole tour to make a documentary on the issue, is famous for having made a great and award-winning documentary called End of the Line on the results of overfishing on the world's oceans. There's a real environmental problem. There's also deforestation. You only have to look at the map of Haiti and the Dominican Republic next door. The Dominican Republic has looked after its forests. Haiti hasn't. It's almost gone. In many other tropical or subtropical areas, the forests have gone. That is an extremely serious problem, because the biodiversity, the sheer teeming species that live in these forests are enormously valuable. We cannot afford to let them go in the way that we are letting them go. So let me make it very clear. Of course, there are many serious, real environmental problems. And for a tiny fraction of the $80 to $100 billion we've spent so far worldwide on addressing the obvious non-problem of global warming, many of those problems could have been by now fairly and squarely addressed.
For those of you that have burning questions remaining, I'm sorry, you're going to have to ask them of our visitors face-to-face, because I'm going to have to close the proceedings. I don't think I need to say very much, because it's been very obvious from your responses that you've really appreciated Lord Monckton coming here. We've put him under enormous strain, because he's given presentations already in Sydney, Newcastle, Brisbane too, Noosa, and now in Melbourne, together with numerous media interviews. Now, I would also like to thank Professor Plimer, who's taken a lot of time out to travel with the Monktons all the way around Australia. They've yet to go to Canberra, they've yet to go to Adelaide and Perth, and will probably have a repeat performance with hopefully a debate in Sydney before the Monktons head off to Scotland. So they've certainly put in an enormous amount of their own effort to be here with you, and I'd like you to show your appreciation. Thank you.